Hello Gut Squad, welcome back to my channel. This is Cecily, as always. Today is going to be a video all about moving as an Ostomate. The reason that this is kind of on my mind right now is because I just moved and it was quite an arduous process for everyone involved, but especially me, because as the person in my family with an ostomy, I had a lot more to think about on this move than I think I used to when I didn't have an ostomy. So let's get into it. The first thing that I want to address is probably something you guys have heard of. It's called a hernia belt, or it can also be called a prolapse belt. There are a lot of different names for it, but basically it's a type of belt that helps prevent injury from doing things like lifting, bending, squatting, etc. This is mine. I've had it for quite a long time. I've had it for 2 years since I got my first ostomy. And the reason I had it was because my first ostomy, well, technically my second ostomy, prolapsed. So I needed a prolapse belt. This is nice because it has this little window that you can open, and it has this little ring that you can fit your pouch into. So your pouch goes in here, and this area is meant to support the stoma itself. And then the rest of it is kind of made to support the rest of your abdomen. And then you just put this part back over here nice and tight, and you have an area where your stoma can poke out, but it's supported by something with a lot of strength. So that's the first tip I have for you guys, and probably the thing that would help you the most to prevent things like herniation, reherniation, prolapsing, any kind of problem with your stoma that you might have as a result of lifting something that's too heavy or lifting too often, or just in general being overly strained. That's tip number one. I'm now going to show you guys what it looks like to have this prolapse belt on your belly. So as you guys can see in this clip, I'm putting on the prolapse belt. And the reason that I like this belt is that it has this large hole through which I can put my ostomy bag. It was custom fitted for the type of bags that I most typically use. And it's also nice because not only does it give extra reinforcement to the stoma itself, but it also is pretty unnoticeable underneath of clothing because that hole prevents a lot of bulging where your bag would normally be with a traditional hernia belt that's not designed for people with stomas in particular. The next tip that I want to talk to you guys about is something that I actually stumbled across when I had my first major hernia. I had a hernia in my very first ostomy site, which was taken down to create a second ostomy site after my second stoma failed due to prolapse. So I'll show a picture of it here. It was a very, very large hernia because there was a hole in the muscle wall. And that's what a hernia is. It's a hole in your abdominal muscle wall. I had this big old hernia, and my little belt here was not doing much for it because it was too low. It was not around the area where a hernia belt would typically help. So my mom and I decided to try something new, and we decided to kind of go back to what I used to do when I was a swimmer and runner and I had really injured muscles and tendons from overuse, and that was to use kinesio tape. I used to use this a lot as a kid when I was an athlete, and I'm sure that you guys are probably familiar with it or have heard of it. It's really commonly used in the practice of physical therapy, and essentially the theory behind kinesio tape is that if you apply kinesio tape correctly to an area that is injured, specifically muscle or tissue surrounding muscle, the idea is to lift the skin a little bit around that muscle or tendon to not only prevent the crushing pain that comes from tearing or straining a muscle, but also to help improve blood circulation and the access of blood to the area. Now, will kinesio tape fix a hernia? Absolutely not. It's not made to fix any kind of hernia. Hernias have to be repaired basically only with surgery. There's no other way to fix a hernia than surgery. These are helpful, but it's absolutely not something that's going to fix your problem. What I will say is that it will reduce the pain and soreness around your ostomy site, and that's why I tend to use it, because my ostomy site, when I'm very, very active and when I'm constantly bending, reaching, squatting, which are things I try to avoid doing too much of, but during moving it's really difficult to avoid those simple things that you kind of take for granted that you can do. I would say it helped me to feel less sore and feel less strain around the stoma area itself. I will give you guys a quick demonstration of how I tend to apply my kinesio tape in the area that used to have the hernia to not only prevent re-injury, but also to alleviate any kind of pain, swelling, or discomfort I might be having around that area of my abdomen, just because it's a little weaker than most people and certainly weaker than it used to be. So here I have a standard roll of kinesio tape, and I cut it in half so that I have two. I'm going to apply it to the most problematic area of my belly, which is directly underneath of my stoma. And as you can see, I'm applying it very, very tightly because the whole idea is to sort of lift the skin around the injured or strained area in order to prevent pain and inflammation. This is not foolproof, like I said, but it's really helpful for me personally. The next tip that I have for you guys, for any ostomates or anyone who suffers with a chronic bowel disease, this tip revolves around preventing dehydration. Dehydration can be deadly, and I'm sure if you're an ostomate, you've gotten the whole fire and brimstone about why it's important not to be dehydrated. But if you're not aware, dehydration can severely affect your heart, it can severely affect every organ system, and it can make you at a greater risk for having hospitalizations or rehospitalizations, especially if you're new to being an ostomate. Because it typically takes a while for your small intestine or even large intestine, if a very large part of it was removed, to compensate for the lack of intestine that used to be there and reabsorb all the water that you should be reabsorbing as a healthy person with a healthy digestive tract. So as someone like me with an ileostomy, I'm at one of the highest risks of dehydration of any people with ostomies. So I use 0.9 normal saline every week to hydrate myself, which I do intravenously through my PICC line. Not everyone has that, and I get that. And actually during this move, I didn't always have time to sit down and do like a 2-hour long infusion. They take a long time. Instead, I used drip drop. Drip drops are so nice because they're actually formulated to have very little sugar, but a lot of electrolytes. They have 3 times the electrolytes and about half the sugar of normal sports drinks. G2 is pretty good if you're gonna go with like an on-brand normal sports drink because it's low sugar, but sugar can change the osmotic pressure in your bowel such that you actually are more prone to dumping, which makes you more prone to dehydration. So drinking sodas or something very sugary is very bad for someone who's already at a risk of dehydration. These will help replenish your electrolytes while not giving you too much sugar to produce a dumping effect. What you want to look at when you're looking at any kind of supplement to help with dehydration in general is the osmolarity. The osmolarity will help give you an idea of how it will affect the osmotic pressure of your bowel. This will also give you things like salt, potassium, magnesium, and sugar to help you regain some of the electrolytes that you may have lost, and they may help reduce like dizziness or wooziness or feeling like your heart's gonna jump out of your chest, which I get frequently when I'm dehydrated. There's nothing more helpful than staying hydrated during a move. You're gonna be sweating, you're moving more than usual, I would assume, so keep yourself hydrated, especially if you're fresh out of the hospital with a new ostomy. You're at such a great risk for coming back with severe dehydration. And it's the summer, so it couldn't be a better time to take dehydration and rehydration really seriously. Next, I want to give you guys a really simple tip that I just use baseline nowadays. I am a short girl. I am 5 feet tall, and I've been told that reaching too much is something that can increase my chances of re-injury of my hernia spot and prolapsing, and can basically hurt the core if you're not careful. So I actually use a little step stool, and I have one in my kitchen, and it's very lightweight, and I take it wherever I go in the house that I might need to reach. This was used a ton during the moving process because I was constantly having to reach and put things on the wall and hang things and put things in my cabinets. So it was really important for me to always remind myself to use the stool instead of trying to reach it myself, because it's just simply not worth it to try to take the risk of, actually reaching up and hurting yourself. Why do that? Stools are so easy, they're cheap, and they are typically very lightweight if you get a stool that's like pretty portable. Mine's about 2 pounds, and it just sits in my kitchen all the time. My stepping stool, I use this guy all the time. And as you can see, I put it in a pretty central location in my kitchen, so I always have it kind of on hand, and it's really easy to use. I can lift it up with a lot of ease, it's collapsible, and I couldn't recommend this enough. It is so important to your family and your friends that you take your health seriously, and that you don't let little things like moving and maybe the impatience of moving and the impatience of wanting your house the way it should be to get in the way of you saying, I need to be humbled, I need to recognize that this isn't just a me problem. Me prolapsing, me herniating, me having a severe problem with my ostomy doesn't just affect me. It affects my parents, it affects my boyfriend, it affects affects my cats, it affects all my friends, it affects everyone who's close to me. I see it as sort of my responsibility as someone with a chronic illness to go out of my way to make sure that my illness doesn't get worse, or that I don't hurt myself, or that I keep myself out of the hospital for as long as possible. And to help me illustrate the importance of letting your family and your friends do for you, I want to introduce a very special guest, my boyfriend, Trevor.
Hi Gut Squad. I just want to thank all of you so much for, being out there and being supportive for my girlfriend.
Yes, we love you guys. I think Trevor would agree with me that it hurts your family more when you push yourself past your limits or what your doctors have mandated you to do.
I agree with that. I think one of the most difficult things about dating an ostomate, especially during a moving process, is that striking the right balance between chastising them for something you know they shouldn't be doing, and also letting them live their life and experience their independence, because Cecily is this incredibly independent, driven woman, and I can't always tell her, no, don't pick that up, but then my brain goes, I don't want to see her in the hospital, no, don't pick that up.
Right. No, that's such a good point. If you are a family member of an ostomate or someone with a chronic illness that makes it such that they can't do things like lift, especially during a move, which is a tumultuous and stressful time anyway, I would say that it's okay for you to step in and be like, you know what? No, you shouldn't be lifting that. Now, of course, Trev's right. You don't want to infringe upon the person's independence or make them feel lesser, but it's important to help remind them how important it is to stay out of the hospital.
Another recommendation is one of the great things that Cecily does is she finds ways to be extremely useful and helpful that don't go against her weight limit. So, for example, she's putting the books away into the cabinet, or she's, brooming the floor, or she's telling me where she wants the artwork to go, she's organizing. If you take that extra step of, okay, how do I make myself feel like I'm contributing as much, because I know that that's like a concern for someone who has to, hold back on something that's intense like moving. Just think about all the creative ways where you can find ways to be useful. And there's no shortage of that with her. And the only recommendation I have for loved ones, because I don't even feel like I should be giving recommendations to ostomates, to be honest, is understand that every single time that you tell them, no, don't lift that, it's a complicated situation for them, and maybe you should have the conversation before you move rather than during, because the move is stressful. When you have it during, it can go to an explosion. When you have it before, you can kind of set some ground rules.
That's what we
Hey, I don't want to see you picking up big boxes.
We had a very open conversation that was to say, essentially, you're doing too much, or we don't want you to do too much. Please reel it back, for our sakes as well as yours.
And a prolapse would devastate us all.
Yes, something like a prolapse or a hernia, we've dealt with these things, and they were traumatic and life-threatening. So I would prefer, of course, to not have those issues, and having loved ones that take the onus of moving things while you go off and do things that are also helpful, but just not as physically strenuous. For instance, I was doing a lot of cleaning and painting during the moving process. It just helps everyone to figure out what their task is and do it better. And I think Trevor makes such a good point about planning these things out before the move itself, because you're going to be so inundated with where things go, what things need to be moved, not forgetting things. You don't want to have that conversation the day of moving.
A little tidbit into your best friend and YouTube personality here. She is what one might call a perfectionist when it comes to how the home is laid out. So I would say, especially if you have someone who has that kind of high-functioning expectation about the home, it's super smart of you to have a conversation with them beforehand. It will make the whole process go well. Now, I couldn't be happier with the home that we've set up. I look forward to the whole year here, and there was no prolapse.
No prolapse. I mean, guys, to Trevor's point, who knew an ostomate could be quite so anal? I think that Trevor did a great job of managing my expectations and helping me to have the house the way I want it without putting myself in danger. So thank you for that, sweetie.
Thank you.
I'm gonna let him get back to work, but I'm glad you guys got to meet Trevor finally. I feel like I talk about him all the time.
Thank you again, Gut Squad. Seriously.
My point to you guys is that if you're like me and you're an impatient, temperamental, anal person who wants things done their way all the time, or it's the highway, having a chronic illness is the most humbling experience you may go through. And it's important to remember that it is okay to ask for help, and actually you're a stronger person for asking for help than you are for doing something yourself and risking hurting yourself. I think anyone with a chronic illness or a family member with a chronic illness can see that it's more beneficial to be careful than to be proud. So that's kind of where I want to leave it for today. I can give you guys a house tour if you like. Please let me know in the comments down below if you want to see the house. I would love to show it off, of course, but if you guys are just here for the Ostomate content, I understand. I really hope that today was helpful for you guys. And if you have any questions or tips of your own for moving, or you want to share your moving stories or the silliest thing that happened to you when you were moving as an Ostomate, let me know. I would love to hear it. Don't forget to go on my Instagram. It will just kind of keep you guys up to date on what I'm doing in my life. This week I haven't posted much because of all the moving, but I'm going on vacation for 4th of July, so I'll probably be posting some stuff from there. Just keep up with me on there if you feel like it. I hope that you guys are all staying safe, staying hydrated, and staying masked in this uncertain time. Bye, Gut Squad.
Hey Freya, are you scared of all the construction? Are you gonna come out? No, she's not gonna come out. Guys, she's spooked.